You'll regret ever stepping foot in this house." Bianca Prescott's voice cut through the hot Australian air like a knife, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor as she stood inches from Clara Dawson. The mansion's atmosphere was stifling under the Sydney summer heat, the silence broken only by the sharp clink of a crystal glass against the counter. Clara's hands trembled around the mop handle, but her gaze never wavered. That moment, that single breath would change everything, though no one in Sydney's exclusive Point Piper neighbourhood could have imagined how. Secrets, pride, and an unexpected bond were about to transform two women's lives forever. This is a story of resilience, redemption, and the quiet strength that can melt even the coldest heart. Prepare yourself, because once you enter this house, you won't leave until the very last word. The Carrington estate sat perched on the edge of Sydney Harbour, its white walls gleaming like a beacon under the relentless Australian sun. From its expansive terraces, one could see the Opera House in the distance, its iconic sails catching the light of the late afternoon. It was the kind of property that appeared in architectural magazines and tourism brochures, a symbol of success, wealth, and unattainable perfection. And yet, no domestic worker lasted more than 3 weeks under the reign of Bianca Prescott Carrington. Clara Dawson stood at the wrought iron gates, her worn canvas bag clutched tightly against her side. The employment agency had warned her about the position, about the parade of housekeepers who had come and gone, about the impossible standards set by the lady of the house. But Clara wasn't in a position to be choosy. Her daughter Sophie's medical bills had piled up faster than the collection notices, and the specialist appointments at Sydney Children's Hospital weren't getting any cheaper. "You must be the new girl," a gruff voice startled Clara from her thoughts. An older man in a crisp uniform approached, keying in the security code. "I'm Morris, head of grounds. Fair warning, she's in one of her moods today." Clara straightened her shoulders. "I'm Clara, and I've handled moods before." Morris gave her a look that suggested she had no idea what she was walking into. "Follow me, then. And remember, eyes down, voice low, and for God's sake, don't suggest any better ways of doing things." The last girl tried that, lasted 6 hours. The grand foyer of the mansion opened before them like a cathedral to luxury. Marble floors reflected the chandelier's prismatic light, and the scent of fresh flowers mingled with furniture polish. Clara felt immediately out of place in her simple button-up shirt and black trousers from the department store. "Wait here," Morris instructed, disappearing down a corridor. Clara stood motionless, absorbing the details of her new workplace. Family photos lined one wall. Richard Carrington, Australia's tech mogul and venture capital king, smiling beside a striking woman with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. Bianca Prescott had been a model before marrying Richard, and it showed in every angle of her face, in the perfect posture captured even in still images. There were no children in the photos, just the power couple, their matching smiles never quite reaching their eyes. "So, this is what Emily sent over." The voice made Clara turn. Bianca Prescott stood at the entrance to the living area, dressed in a white linen dress that somehow remained unwrinkled in the summer heat. Her blonde hair was pulled back, in a sleek ponytail emphasizing the cool assessment in her blue eyes. "Mrs. Carrington," Clara nodded respectfully. "Clara Dawson, thank you for the opportunity." "Save it," Bianca cut her off, circling Clara like a shark. "Emily insists you're different from the others. More resilient was the word she used. We'll see about that." She stopped directly in front of Clara. The last girl cried when I pointed out the streak marks she left on the windows. The one before her quit when I asked her to redo the laundry because she used the wrong setting on the silk blouses. Clara met her gaze steadily. "I'm here to work, Mrs. Carrington." I learned quickly. Something flickered in Bianca's eyes, surprised perhaps at not seeing immediate intimidation. "Your references say you worked for the Hendersons in Mosman. For 3 years, yes. And yet here you are, starting over in a new house. Why is that, I wonder?" Clara hesitated. "The Hendersons moved to Melbourne for business. They offered to take me, but I needed to stay in Sydney. For family reasons." Bianca's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched slightly. "Family? How quaint." She turned abruptly. "Follow me. I'll show you your duties and the staff quarters you'll be expected to live in. Is that going to be a problem with your family reasons?" Clara swallowed hard. She'd anticipated this, had made arrangements with her neighbour Mrs. Patterson to look in on Sophie during the week. Weekends would be her time with her daughter if she lasted that long in this position. No problem, Mrs. Carrington. The tour was brisk and efficient. The mansion had 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 3 living areas, a formal dining room, a gourmet kitchen, a library, a home theatre and a pool house. Clara would be responsible for cleaning all interior spaces, assisting the cook with meal service, managing the laundry, and anything else required to maintain standards, as Bianca put it. Your quarters are through here, Bianca led her down a hallway off the kitchen to a small but tastefully furnished room with an attached bathroom. You'll have Sundays off, provided all weekly tasks are completed to satisfaction. Any questions? Clara set her bag down. When would you like me to start? Bianca checked her watch. It's nearly 4. The dining room silver needs polishing before dinner at 7. Richard is hosting an investor tonight. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Clara. Yes, Mrs. Carrington. I don't give second chances. This house reflects on me, and by extension on my husband's business reputation. Perfection isn't requested. It's required. With that she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the weight of unspoken expectations. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself 5 minutes, no more, to feel the magnitude of what she'd taken on. Then she opened her bag, pulled out a framed photo of Sophie, and placed it on the nightstand. Her daughter's smile, gap-toothed and genuine despite the pallor of her complexion, was all the motivation Clara needed. We've got this, Soph, she whispered, running her finger over the glass. Just like we always do. By the time Clara reached the dining room, she'd changed into her uniform, a simple black dress with a white collar, and pulled her dark hair into a neat bun. The silver service lay waiting on a sideboard, along with polishing cloths and specialized cleaners. As she worked, she could hear Bianca's voice drifting from somewhere upstairs, sharp and demanding on a phone call. The house seemed to hold its breath around her voice, as if the very walls were afraid to displease her. You're brave, you are. Clara looked up to find a middle-aged woman watching her from the kitchen doorway. I'm Maggie, the cook, the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. Been here since before Her Highness arrived. Only one she hasn't managed to run off yet. Nice to meet you, Clara smiled, continuing her methodical polishing. Word of advice. Maggie leaned closer. Mr. Carrington likes his breakfast at 6:30 sharp. Coffee black, 2 sugars. The way to survive in this house is to make yourself indispensable to him. She might sign the checks, but he signs hers, if you get my meaning. Clara nodded, filing away the information. Thanks for the tip. And one more thing, Maggie added, glancing over her shoulder. Whatever you do, don't ask about the photos. Photos? The ones that aren't there anymore. With that cryptic statement, Maggie retreated to her kitchen, leaving Clara with more questions than answers. By the time Richard Carrington arrived home at 6:30, the dining room gleamed with perfection. Clara had polished every piece of silver to a mirror, finished and arranged them according to the diagram she'd found in the butler's pantry. She was just lighting the candles when she heard the front door open. Bianca, a deep voice called. Clara straightened, smoothing her uniform. First impressions mattered, especially with the man who ultimately controlled her employment. From the dining room doorway, she caught her first in-person glimpse of Richard Carrington, Australia's 45th richest man according to last year's financial review. He was taller than she expected, with silver-streaked dark hair and the weathered tan of someone who spent time on boats. His suit was obviously expensive, but worn with casual comfort. What surprised Clara most was the weariness in his eyes, the look of a man carrying burdens invisible to the public. Their gazes met briefly across the foyer. Richard nodded, a simple acknowledgement, before Bianca appeared at the top of the stairs in a stunning red dress, commanding all attention. Darling, you're home early. Bianca descended with practiced grace. I see you've spotted our new housekeeper, Clara, isn't it? Yes, ma'am, Clara responded, already retreating to the kitchen where she belonged. But not before she caught the curious glance Richard Carrington cast in her direction, a look that seemed to carry both warning and apology. The game had begun. Clara just hoped she had what it took to win. Morning light streamed through the windows of the Carrington mansion, illuminating dust particles that Clara knew would be her enemy by day's end. She had risen at 5, giving herself time to enjoy a moment of quiet with a cup of tea before the household stirred to life. The dinner party the previous night had gone smoothly, at least from what Clara could observe from her discreet position, helping Maggie serve and clear. Richard Carrington had charmed his guest, while Bianca had played the perfect hostess, her smile never faltering even as her eyes tracked Clara's every move, waiting for a mistake that never came. Now Clara moved efficiently through the kitchen, preparing the breakfast tray for Mr. Carrington exactly as Maggie had instructed. Black coffee with 2 sugars, toasted sourdough with a side of avocado, and the morning's financial review folded precisely beside the bone china plate. "You're up early," Maggie said, appearing in the doorway. "Usually I handle breakfast." "I thought I'd get a head start," Clara replied. "Is there a preferred tray for Mr. Carrington?" Maggie smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "The silver one in the pantry. He likes his coffee hot enough to scald, so time it right." She checked her watch. "He'll be in his study. Knock twice, enter, place the tray on the right side of his desk, and leave without a word unless he speaks to you first." Clara nodded, absorbing the unwritten rules of the house. "And Mrs. Carrington?" "She takes her breakfast at 8. Green smoothie, gluten-free toast, nothing that resembles actual food," Maggie said with a sniff of disapproval. "But she'll be at yoga until 9 today, Thursday routine." Armed with this information, Clara prepared Mr. Carrington's tray and made her way to the study. The morning sun cast long shadows through the hallway, highlighting the expensive artwork on the walls, all abstract pieces that Clara suspected were chosen more for their investment value than aesthetic appeal. She knocked twice on the heavy wooden door of the study. "Come in," came the response. Richard Carrington sat behind a massive desk, already dressed in a crisp suit minus the jacket, which hung on a nearby chair. Multiple screens displayed financial data before him, and a tablet sat propped beside a leather portfolio. "Good morning, sir," Clara said, placing the tray in the designated spot. "Your breakfast?" Richard looked up, seeming momentarily surprised to see someone new. "Thank you. Clara, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." He studied her briefly. "You're not what I expected." Clara wasn't sure how to respond to that. "Sir, the agency usually sends us older women. They seem to think they'll stand up better to—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The demands of the position." "I'm tougher than I look," Clara replied simply. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "For your sake, I hope so." He gestured to the tray. "Thank you for breakfast. This will be all." Clara nodded and turned to leave. "One more thing," Richard added. "The blue guest room needs to be prepared. My sister will be staying with us this weekend." "Of course, sir. I'll see to it immediately." As Clara closed the study door behind her, she couldn't help but feel she'd passed some sort of test. The brief interaction had been cordial, professional, completely different from the icy reception Bianca had given her. The blue guest room was located in the east wing of the mansion, overlooking the harbor. Clara spent the morning giving it a thorough cleaning, changing the linens to fresh Egyptian cotton sheets, and arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase by the window. She was just fluffing the final pillow when a sharp voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" Bianca stood in the doorway, still in her yoga attire, designer of course, with a steel water bottle clutched in one manicured hand. "Preparing the blue room for Mr. Carrington's sister, ma'am," Clara replied evenly. Bianca's eyes narrowed. "Who told you to do that?" "Mr. Carrington requested it this morning." "Did he specify the blue room? Those exact words?" Clara hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. He said, the blue guest room." Bianca's lips pressed into a thin line. "Richard knows very well that Caroline prefers the green room with the harbor view. The blue room gets the morning sun, which disturbs her sleep." She swept into the room, examining Clara's work with critical eyes. "You'll need to redo everything in the green room, and those flowers won't do. Caroline is allergic to lilies." Clara kept her expression neutral despite the frustration building inside her. "I understand. I'll move everything to the green room right away." "See that you do." Bianca turned to leave, then paused, her gaze falling on a barely perceptible wrinkle in the duvet. With deliberate slowness, she set her water bottle down on the pristine white surface, leaving a wet ring on the fabric. "You missed a spot," she said, coldly, before walking away. Clara stood motionless until the sound of Bianca's footsteps faded down the hallway. Then she took a deep breath, removed the duvet cover for washing, and began the process of dismantling her morning's work to start again in a different room. By lunchtime, the green guest room was prepared to what Clara hoped were acceptable standards, with roses instead of lilies, and the curtains adjusted to minimize the harbor light. She had just finished when her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Sophie asking when she can see you. Having good day today. Doctor says encouraging signs. Attached was a photo of Sophie sitting up in bed, a colourful drawing on her lap. Clara felt her heart constrict with love and longing. 4 more days until Sunday, her first day off. Is that your daughter? Clara nearly jumped, hastily tucking her phone away as she turned to face Richard Carrington, who stood in the doorway of the guest room. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I was just checking. Richard waved away her apology. No need to apologize for being a mother, Clara. He glanced around the room. I see you've prepared the green room, not the blue. Mrs. Carrington suggested your sister would prefer this room. A flicker of something, annoyance, resignation, crossed Richard's face. Yes, I suppose she would. He stepped further into the room. How old is your daughter? 8, sir. And she's unwell. Clara hesitated, uncomfortable discussing personal matters with her employer. She has a congenital heart condition. She's stable, but requires regular medical care. Richard nodded thoughtfully. That must be difficult for you both. We manage, Clara replied simply. For a moment, Richard seemed about to say something more, but instead, he merely nodded again. The room looks perfect. Thank you. As he turned to leave, Clara found herself speaking up. Mr. Carrington, may I ask a question? He paused. Of course. Is there anything specific I should know about preparing for your sister's visit? Any preferences or requirements I should be aware of? Richard seemed surprised by the question. Caroline is particular, but not unreasonable. She likes fresh water and lemon by her bed at night, prefers her towels folded in thirds rather than halves, and is partial to Earl Grey tea in the afternoons. He offered a small smile. She's also the only person who can consistently win arguments with my wife, so prepare for some interesting dinner conversations. Thank you, sir. I'll make note of those preferences. After Richard left, Clara pulled out a small notebook and jotted down the details he'd shared. Information was power in a house like this, the difference between surviving and thriving. The afternoon passed in a flurry of cleaning and preparations. Clara worked methodically through her tasks, keeping her head down and her focus sharp. She encountered Bianca only once more, in the main living area, where the lady of the house was arranging flowers with aggressive precision. The green room is ready for Miss Carrington, Clara reported. Fresh water with lemon on the nightstand, towels folded in thirds, and Earl Grey tea stocked in the kitchenette. Bianca's hands stilled. Her eyes met Clara's with a calculating look. You've been speaking with my husband. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. He mentioned his sister's preferences, yes. How thoughtful of you to ask, Bianca said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. She returned to her flower arranging, snipping a stem with unnecessary force. Tell me, Clara, do you always take such initiative with your employers? I try to anticipate needs, yes. Bianca selected another bloom, examining it critically. Just remember that anticipation and overstepping are separated by a very fine line in this house. The warning was clear. Clara nodded and turned to go, but Bianca wasn't finished. By the way, I'll need you to stay late tomorrow evening. We're hosting a charity committee meeting and I'll require assistance with serving drinks and canapes. I assume that won't be a problem with your childcare arrangements. Clara felt a spike of anxiety. Mrs. Patterson hadn't agreed to evening hours, and finding last-minute childcare for Sophie was nearly impossible given her medical needs. I'll make it work. Mrs. Carrington. Excellent. Bianca smiled, a sharp curve that held no warmth. That's all. As Clara left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Bianca had deliberately waited until the last minute to spring this change on her. Another test, another way to assert control. That evening, after serving dinner and ensuring the kitchen was spotless, Clara retreated to her quarters. She called Mrs. Patterson, who grudgingly agreed to stay late with Sophie the following evening, for an additional fee, of course. She misses you, something fierce, Mrs. Patterson said. Keeps asking when Mummy's coming home properly. Tell her Sunday, Clara replied, the familiar guilt settling heavy in her chest. I'll spend the whole day with her, I promise. After hanging up, Clara pulled out Sophie's most recent drawing from her bag, a colourful rendition of what appeared to be 2 stick figures, holding hands beside a large blue shape that might have been the ocean. Across the top, in wobbly letters, Me and Mummy at the beach someday. Clara pinned it to the small corkboard above her desk, a reminder of why she was here, why she would endure Bianca's tests and Richard's curious glances, and the weight of a house too perfect to feel like a home. She would survive this place because Sophie needed her to, and perhaps, if she played the game just right, she might do more than survive. She might find a way to win. The charity committee meeting was scheduled for 7 in the evening, but Bianca had Clara preparing since mid-afternoon. The living room had to be rearranged, crystal glasses, polished and specialty canapes arranged on silver platters exactly 1 inch apart, a detail Bianca insisted upon, going so far as to produce a ruler to demonstrate the proper spacing. These women represent the most influential philanthropic circle in Sydney, Bianca explained as she supervised Clara's work. The Prescott Family Foundation depends on their goodwill. It was the first time Bianca had mentioned her family name with something approaching pride, and Clara filed away this information carefully. The Prescott Family Foundation, a potential key to understanding her enigmatic employer. "What causes does the foundation support?" Clara asked, carefully placing another smoked salmon blini on the tray. Bianca paused, seemingly surprised by Clara's interest. "Children's medical. Research primarily. My father established it 20 years ago after my brother died of leukemia." The revelation hung in the air between them, an unexpected glimpse behind the polished veneer. "I'm sorry about your brother," Clara said quietly. Bianca's expression shuttered immediately. "That's not relevant to the task at hand. The glasses need to be arranged by height on the credenza." She checked her watch. "And you'll need to change into the formal serving uniform. It's in your closet. Black dress, white apron, low heels." By 6:30, the mansion was transformed into a showcase of understated elegance. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers, fresh flowers adorned every surface, and the harbor lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Clara stood unobtrusively in the corner, dressed in the formal uniform that felt stiff and uncomfortable compared to her usual attire. Richard appeared briefly, greeting his wife with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek before retreating to his study. "I'll make myself scarce for your meeting," he said. "Just send Clara if you need anything." Bianca nodded, already distracted by a text message on her phone. "The first guests will arrive any minute. Be ready, Clara." The women who comprised the charity committee arrived in waves of expensive perfume and designer outfits. Clara moved among them with practiced efficiency, offering champagne and canapes while remaining as invisible as possible. She recognized several faces from society pages: the wife of a state senator, a renowned cardiac surgeon, the owner of Sydney's most exclusive boutique. "Bianca, darling, everything looks divine as always," gushed a woman with platinum blonde hair styled in an immaculate bob. "How do you manage it all?" Bianca accepted the compliment with practiced grace. "It's all about finding the right help, Margaret, though it's been quite the challenge lately. Still going through housekeepers like tissues, are we?" another woman asked with a knowing smile. "This one seems to be sticking," Margaret observed, glancing in Clara's direction. "She has a certain competence about her." Clara kept her expression neutral as she offered another tray of canapes, acutely aware of being discussed as if she weren't present. The meeting proceeded with discussions of fundraising goals, upcoming galas, and grant allocations. Clara listened with half an ear as she attended to her duties, more interested in observing the dynamics between Bianca and her peers. Despite her commanding presence in her own home, Bianca seemed almost deferential to the cardiac surgeon, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Clara gleaned from conversation, whose opinions were received with universal approval. "Before we conclude," Dr. Chen said as the evening wound down, "I'd like to discuss the pediatric cardiac wing expansion. The preliminary designs are complete, but we're still 5 million short of our funding goal." "The Carrington Group could cover that," one woman suggested, looking pointedly at Bianca. A flicker of something, discomfort, frustration, crossed Bianca's perfect features. "As I've explained before, Richard's company is separate from the foundation. I can certainly speak with him, but—" Of course, Dr. Chen interjected smoothly. "We understand the delicacy of mixing business with philanthropy. Perhaps we could discuss alternative fundraising strategies." Clara, returning from the kitchen with fresh drinks, nearly dropped her tray when she heard Dr. Chen's next words. "I've been reviewing some of our current cases, and there's a particularly promising candidate for our new valve procedure. A young girl, 8 years old, Congenital defect, the kind of success story that could really galvanize donors. 8 years old, congenital heart defect. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she set down champagne flutes. "Do you have the case file?" Bianca asked. Dr. Chen produced a tablet from her designer. "Tote. Sophie Dawson. She's been on the standard treatment protocol, but she's an ideal candidate for the new procedure. Unfortunately, her mother's insurance doesn't cover experimental treatments." Clara froze, her back to the group, heart hammering in her chest. "Sophie. Her Sophie. What's the prognosis without the procedure?" Bianca inquired, scanning the tablet screen. "Manageable for now, but increasingly complicated as she grows. The new valve would essentially correct the defect permanently." Clara forced herself to continue working, mind racing. How did Sophie's case reach Dr. Chen? Was it mere coincidence or something more? "We could feature her at the spring gala," one committee member suggested. "Nothing opens wallets like a brave little girl." "Let me think about it," Bianca said, her tone non-committal. "We need to be careful about exploiting children's stories, even for a good cause." As the meeting concluded and guests began to depart, Clara maintained her professional demeanor despite the emotional turmoil inside. Her daughter's future was being discussed casually over champagne by women who had no idea that the mother stood among them, serving their drinks. After the last guest left, Bianca kicked off her heels with an uncharacteristic display of fatigue. She noticed Clara collecting glasses and paused. "You did well tonight," she said, the closest thing to a compliment Clara had received since arriving. The committee was impressed with the service. "Thank you, Mrs. Carrington." Bianca stretched her neck from side to side. "You may finish cleaning in the morning. It's late." Clara hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Mrs. Carrington, may I ask about something I overheard?" Bianca's expression immediately sharpened. "You're paid to serve, not to listen." "It's about my daughter," Clara pressed on. "Sophie Dawson. Dr. Chen mentioned her case tonight." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Bianca's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of her surprise. "Sophie is your daughter?" "Yes, ma'am. She's been treated at Sydney Children's for 3 years. I had no idea her case was being considered for the new procedure." Bianca studied Clara with new intensity. "Why didn't you mention this when I hired you?" "Would it have made a difference?" Clara asked quietly. Instead of answering, Bianca crossed to a small bar cart and poured herself a measure of scotch. "Does Richard know?" "He knows she's ill, not the details." Bianca took a slow sip, her expression unreadable. "The Foundation reviews hundreds of cases. That your daughter's file crossed my desk is quite a coincidence." "Is there any way—" Clara began, then stopped herself. Asking for favors wasn't part of the careful balance she'd maintained so far. "Go to bed, Clara," Bianca said, turning away. "We'll discuss this another time." In her quarters, Clara called Mrs. Patterson for a late-night update on Sophie. "She's sleeping now," the older woman reported. "Had a good day, all things considered. Drew you another picture, some sort of fairy castle this time." After hanging up, Clara sat on her bed, mind whirling with the evening's revelations. The Prescott Foundation funded pediatric cardiac research. Dr. Chen was considering Sophie for an experimental procedure, and Bianca, cold, demanding Bianca, had lost a brother to illness. Perhaps there were more cards to play in this game than Clara had realized. Caroline Carrington arrived on Friday afternoon in a flurry of Louis Vuitton luggage and exuberant greetings, unlike her brother's restrained demeanor. Caroline was all animation and warmth, embracing Richard and even Bianca with genuine affection. "And who's this?" she asked when Clara appeared to assist with the luggage. "Our new housekeeper, Clara Dawson," Richard introduced. "Clara, my sister Caroline." "Lovely to meet you," Caroline said, extending her hand in a gesture that immediately set her apart from most employers Clara had encountered. "I hope my brother and his wife aren't working you too hard." "Not at all, Miss Carrington," Clara replied, accepting the handshake. Caroline laughed, a rich sound that filled the foyer. "It's just Caroline, please. Miss Carrington makes me sound like a spinster schoolteacher." She glanced around the immaculate mansion, though I suppose proper forms of address are part of the Bianca Prescott experience. Bianca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "We've prepared the green room for you, as you prefer. Clara will show you up while Richard and I finish some work calls." As Clara led Caroline upstairs with the lighter pieces of luggage, the heavier cases handled by Morris, She couldn't help but notice the easy confidence with which the woman moved through the house, not as a guest, but as someone who considered this space partially her own. "So, Clara," Caroline said once they reached the guest room, "how long have you been subjecting yourself to my sister-in-law's exacting standards?" "Just over a week, Caroline." "A week? That's practically a record." Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, kicking off her designer flats. "What's your secret?" Clara arranged the luggage carefully by the closet. "No secret, I just do my job." Caroline studied her with intelligent eyes so similar to Richard's. "And what brought you to the Carrington household? Previous experience with demanding employers? Masochistic tendencies? Financial desperation?" The bluntness of the question startled a small laugh from Clara. "The third option, more or less. Honesty. I like that." Caroline stood and moved to the window, looking out at the harbour view. "This house has seen a parade of staff come and go since Bianca moved in. Most can't tolerate her intensity." Clara remained professional. "Mrs. Carrington has high standards." "Mrs. Carrington has wounds," Caroline corrected quietly, "but that's neither here nor there." She turned back with a bright smile. "I'll unpack later. I need to steal Richard for our traditional sibling catch-up before Bianca monopolizes the evening." After Caroline bounded downstairs, Clara finished arranging the guest room, placing fresh water with lemon on the nightstand and ensuring the Earl Grey tea was prominently displayed in the kitchenette. As she worked, she reflected on Caroline's words about Bianca having wounds. Combined with what she'd learned about Bianca's brother, a more complex picture of her employer was beginning to emerge. The evening brought a small dinner party, just the Carringtons and Caroline, with Clara and Maggie working together to serve the three-course meal Bianca had specified. The conversation flowed more easily with Caroline present, her natural charm drawing out even Bianca's more relaxed side. So the client just stands there, champagne dripping from his $3,000 suit, and says, "I think we should revisit the contract terms," Richard was saying, concluding a business anecdote that had both women laughing. "Only you could turn a catastrophe into a better deal," Caroline remarked, raising her wineglass in a toast. "The famous Carrington luck." "Speaking of luck," Bianca interjected, her voice taking on a pointed quality, "how's your gallery doing, Caroline? Still showcasing those interesting installation pieces?" A subtle tension entered the room. Clara, collecting plates, observed the slight stiffening of Caroline's shoulders. "The gallery's thriving, actually. We just sold a major piece to the National Gallery of Victoria, 7 figures. "How impressive," Bianca replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And here Richard thought your art degree would never pay off." "Bianca," Richard warned quietly. "What?" "I'm complimenting Caroline's success," Bianca said innocently. "It's not easy making a name for yourself outside the Carrington shadow." Caroline's laugh held a new edge. "No one knows that better than you, do they, Bianca? From catalogue model to Mrs. Richard Carrington, quite the career leap." Clara retreated to the kitchen as the conversation took on increasingly barbed undertones. Maggie was preparing dessert, a delicate passion-fruit pavlova that had taken hours to perfect. "Family dinners," Maggie muttered. "Always entertaining in this house." "They seem to have some unresolved issues," Clara observed quietly. Maggie snorted. "Caroline never thought anyone was good enough for her brother, especially not a model with social climbing ambitions. And Bianca resents that Caroline has her own money and career, independent of the Carrington fortune." She carefully placed fresh berries on the pavlova. Best stay clear of their crossfire. When Clara returned with dessert, the atmosphere had shifted again. Caroline was showing photos on her phone, her voice animated. "The opening night was incredible. Full gallery, critics from every major publication. Even that sour-faced reviewer from the Australian had positive things to say." "You've always had an eye for talent," Richard said proudly. "Speaking of talent," Caroline continued, accepting a dessert plate from Clara with a smile of thanks, "I've been meaning to ask about the Foundation's arts therapy program. Have you made any progress with that proposal, Bianca?" Bianca delicately cut into her pavlova. "We're focusing our resources on medical research this year. Art therapy is supplementary at best. Studies show it significantly improves outcomes and quality of life," Caroline countered, "especially for children undergoing long-term treatment." Clara's ears perked up at the mention of children's treatment, her thoughts immediately going to Sophie. "The board makes decisions based on medical priorities, Not artistic ones, Bianca replied coolly. Dr. Chen is particularly focused on the new cardiac valve procedure. Ah yes, the famous Dr. Chen, Caroline said, rolling her eyes slightly. Walks on water, does she? Elizabeth is one of Australia's leading pediatric cardiac surgeons, Bianca defended. Her work has saved countless children, and she never lets anyone forget it, Caroline muttered into her wine glass. The tension was broken by Richard's deliberate change of subject to Caroline's upcoming travels. Clara continued her duties, clearing dessert plates and serving coffee, all while processing the new information being revealed in these unguarded moments. Later that night, after the household had retired, Clara sat at her small desk writing a letter to Sophie. She couldn't visit until Sunday, but she wanted her daughter to have something tangible from her mother, a tradition they'd maintained through every separation. A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it, she found Caroline Carrington standing in the hallway, dressed in silk pajamas and holding 2 mugs. I hope I'm not disturbing you, Caroline said. I made tea and thought you might like some. Earl Grey, I have plenty. Surprised by the gesture, Clara stepped back. Please come in. Her quarters suddenly felt very small with Caroline's presence. The woman glanced around with undisguised curiosity, her gaze landing on Sophie's drawings pinned to the corkboard. Your daughter? She asked, handing Clara one of the mugs. Yes, Sophie. Caroline moved closer to examine the drawings. She's talented. How old is she? 8. She's been in and out of hospital most of her life. I'm sorry to hear that. Caroline's expression was genuinely sympathetic. Is that why you're working here? Medical bills? Clara nodded, warming her hands around the mug. The Australian healthcare system is good, but Sophie needs specialized care that isn't fully covered. Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, making herself comfortable. And now, you're in the belly of the beast, serving the very people who could help her. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, come on, Caroline said with a knowing look. The Prescott Foundation's primary focus is pediatric cardiac care. Bianca practically lives at Sydney Children's Hospital when she's not terrorizing household staff. She sipped her tea. It's why I find her so frustrating. She does important work, then comes home and acts like the ice queen of Point Piper. Clara remained cautious. Mrs. Carrington mentioned the foundation was started after her brother died. Michael. He was 12. Caroline's expression softened. It destroyed their family. Her father poured his grief into the foundation, and Bianca followed in his footsteps. It's the one area where she's genuinely passionate, though she keeps that well hidden behind her society wife facade. The information recontextualized everything Clara had observed about Bianca. Yesterday, during a committee meeting, I overheard Dr. Chen discussing Sophie's case, she admitted. Mrs. Carrington seemed surprised when I told her Sophie was my daughter. Caroline raised an eyebrow. Interesting coincidence. Is it a coincidence? Clara asked directly. Caroline studied her for a long moment. Richard mentioned hiring someone whose child had medical issues. Bianca has access to all patient files under consideration for foundation programs. She shrugged. Draw your own conclusions. The implication hung in the air. Had Bianca known about Sophie all along? Had Clara been hired because of her daughter, not despite her? Why are you telling me this? Clara asked. Because this house is full of people who can't say what they mean, Caroline replied, standing to leave. It gets exhausting after a while. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you're good for them, both of them. Richard seems less resigned since you arrived. After Caroline left, Clara sat with her cooling tea, mind racing with new possibilities. If Bianca had specifically sought her out because of Sophie, what was her endgame? Testing Clara's resilience, evaluating her worthiness for foundation assistance, or was there something deeper at play? Something connected to the brother Bianca had lost and never mentioned until yesterday. Whatever the truth, Clara now understood that her position in this household was more complex than she'd realized. She wasn't just fighting to keep a job. She was navigating a labyrinth of old grief, family tension, and possibly the key to Sophie's future. Saturday morning dawned with unexpected rain, a rarity in Sydney's summer. Clara woke to the gentle patter against her window and the distant rumble of thunder over the harbour. The house felt different somehow, quieter, more subdued, as if the weather had cast a spell over its usual sharp-edged perfection. She was preparing breakfast when Richard appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in casual weekend attire, chinos, and a blue button-down that softened his usual business demeanor. "Good morning, Clara," he greeted her. "Is Maggie not in yet?" "She has Saturdays off, sir. I'll be handling meals today." Richard nodded, leaning against the doorframe with unexpected informality. "In that case, don't bother with the formal breakfast service. Caroline sleeps until noon on weekends and Bianca's at her Pilates class until 10. He glanced at the elaborate spread Clara had begun preparing. "Just coffee for me, if you don't mind. I'll grab something later." "Of course, sir." As Clara prepared his coffee, Richard wandered to the window, watching the rain create ripples across the infinity pool. "Your daughter, Sophie, isn't it? How is she doing?" The question caught Clara off guard. "She's stable. The doctors are monitoring her closely." Richard accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "Caroline mentioned her condition last night, a congenital heart defect." "Yes, sir. She was born with a ventricular septal defect, a hole between the chambers of her heart. She's had 2 surgeries already, but she'll likely need more as she grows." Richard's expression was thoughtful. "And you're managing her care alone?" Clara stiffened slightly. "Yes, her father isn't in the picture." "I apologize, I didn't mean to pry." Richard took a sip of his coffee. "It's just that Bianca mentioned Sophie might be a candidate for a new procedure the foundation is funding." So Bianca had discussed Sophie after all. Clara measured her response carefully. "I only learned about that possibility recently." Richard studied her over the rim of his cup. "Clara, may I speak frankly?" "Of course, sir." "My wife processes emotion differently than most people, especially when it comes to children with heart conditions." He set down his cup. "The foundation was established after her brother died from complications following heart surgery. Bianca was 15 at the time." Mrs. Carrington mentioned the foundation's history, Clara acknowledged. "What she probably didn't mention is that she was the one who found Michael when he collapsed. She performed CPR until the ambulance arrived, but it was too late." Richard's voice softened. "She's never quite forgiven herself for not saving him." The revelation cast Bianca in an entirely new light, not just as a demanding perfectionist, but as someone shaped by profound trauma. "I didn't know," Clara said quietly. "Few people do. She prefers it that way." Richard straightened. "I'm telling you this because I think you should know why she might seem particularly invested in your situation. Behind her difficult exterior, Bianca cares deeply about the foundation's work." Before Clara could respond, the front door opened and closed, with a decisive thud. Moments later, Bianca appeared in the kitchen doorway, her Pilates outfit immaculate despite the rain, not a hair out of place. "Discussing household matters without me?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp as they moved between Richard and Clara. "Just morning coffee," Richard replied easily. "I was about to head to my study. I have a video call with the Singapore office at 11. Bianca hummed non-committally, moving to the refrigerator. "Clara, I'll need a green smoothie, and the guest bathroom in the east wing needs attention. Caroline seems to have used every towel available." "Right away, Mrs. Carrington." As Clara busied herself with the smoothie ingredients, she could feel Bianca's gaze on her back. "Richard," Bianca said, her voice carrying a note of suspicion, "what were you really discussing with Clara?" Richard sighed. "Sophie's condition. I mentioned the foundation might be able to help." A tense silence filled the kitchen. Clara kept her focus on the blender, conscious of the unspoken current between husband and wife. "I see," Bianca said finally. "Well, that's a foundation matter, not a household one. We should keep the boundaries." "Clear." Her heels clicked sharply as she approached Clara. "My smoothie?" Clara handed her the perfectly prepared drink. "Here you are, Mrs. Carrington." "Thank you." Bianca took a sip, her expression revealing nothing. "When you've finished with the bathroom, the silver needs polishing. We're hosting a dinner for Richard's executive team on Monday." With that, she swept from the kitchen, leaving. Behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and unresolved tension, the day progressed with the usual tasks, though Clara found herself more attuned to the undercurrents in the household after her conversation with Richard. She was cleaning the formal dining room when Caroline found her, dressed in jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look younger than her 30-something years. "There you are," Caroline said cheerfully. "I've been looking all over. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," Clara replied, setting aside her polishing cloth. Caroline glanced around conspiratorially before pulling a business card from her pocket. "This is Dr. Rohan Sharma. He's a pediatric cardiologist who works with my gallery on art therapy programs for young patients. He's also an expert in congenital heart conditions. Clara accepted the card, confusion evident on her face. I don't understand. Let's just say I have my doubts about the Foundation's selection process for their experimental treatments, Caroline explained. Dr. Sharma can give you an independent opinion on Sophie's case. No strings attached, no Prescott family politics involved. Why would you do this for me? Clara asked, genuinely puzzled by the gesture. Caroline's expression softened. Because I know what it's like to be a pawn in Bianca's chess game, and because no child's medical care should be subject to the whims of a foundation board. Before Clara could respond, a cold voice cut through the air. How touching. Bianca stood in the doorway, her expression glacial, undermining the Foundation's work. Already, Caroline? That must be a record, even for you. Caroline straightened, unintimidated. Offering options isn't undermining, Bianca. It's called informed choice. Dr. Chen is the foremost expert in pediatric cardiac care in Australia, Bianca replied, her voice dangerously calm. But by all means, send Clara to your art therapy friend instead. I'm sure his finger paintings will fix her. Congenital heart defect. Dr. Sharma is a respected cardiologist who happens to support holistic care approaches, Caroline shot back. Not everyone needs to worship at the altar of Elizabeth Chen. Clara stood frozen between them, the business card clutched in her hand, acutely aware of being caught in a power struggle she hadn't anticipated. Clara, Bianca said sharply, I believe I asked you to polish the silver. Yes, Mrs. Carrington. Clara tucked the card into her pocket and moved to leave. And Clara, Bianca added, remember who signs your paychecks, the paychecks that fund your daughter's medical care. The threat was thinly veiled, and Clara felt a flash of anger burn through her customary composure. She stopped, turning slowly to face Bianca. Are you suggesting my employment is contingent on rejecting Dr. Sharma's consultation? She asked quietly. Bianca's eyes widened slightly, clearly not expecting this direct challenge. I'm suggesting you consider carefully who truly has Sophie's best interests at heart. I believe that would be me, Clara replied, her voice level despite her racing heart. Her mother. The air between them crackled with tension. Caroline let out a low whistle. She's got you there, Bianca, she remarked. Bianca's perfect composure finally cracked. Get out, Caroline. This is between me and my employee. Your employee? Caroline echoed incredulously. Listen to yourself. This is a woman with a sick child, not a chess piece in whatever game you're playing. You know nothing about my intentions, Bianca hissed. Nothing. I know that you can't control everything and everyone, Caroline retorted. I know that your need to manage every detail, to be the savior, the perfect Mrs. Carrington, comes from a place of pain, but it doesn't justify manipulating people's lives. Enough! Bianca's shout echoed through the dining room, shocking both women into silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she pointed toward the door. Get out! Caroline! Now! Caroline hesitated, glancing at Clara with concern. Are you okay? Clara nodded, though she was far from certain. With a last look of disgust toward Bianca, Caroline left the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Bianca turned to Clara, her composure reassembling itself like armor. You may take the rest of the day off. I suggest you use it to consider your priorities. Mrs. Carrington, Clara began, but Bianca cut her off with a raised hand. That will be all, Clara. Left alone in her quarters, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, turning Dr. Sharma's card over in her fingers. The confrontation had laid bare the complex dynamics at play. Bianca's control issues, Caroline's rebellion, and Clara caught in the middle with Sophie's welfare hanging in the balance, her. Phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Hospital called. Sophie running slight fever. Nothing serious, but they're monitoring. The timing couldn't be worse. Clara needed to be with her daughter, but leaving now, after the confrontation with Bianca, would almost certainly cost her this job. And without this job, how would she pay for Sophie's ongoing care? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Richard standing there, his expression concerned. May I come in? He asked. Clara stepped back, allowing him entry. I assume you've heard about what happened. Caroline gave me the highlights, he confirmed, remaining standing rather than sitting. I wanted to check that you're all right. I'm not sure what I am, Clara admitted. Confused. Concerned. She Showed him the text from Mrs. Patterson. Sophie's running a fever. I need to see her, but you're afraid of the consequences. Richard finished for her. Clara, please understand. Bianca isn't trying to control Sophie's care out of malice. She genuinely believes the Foundation's program is Sophie's best chance. Then why threaten my job? Why make it conditional? Richard sighed heavily. Because control is how she copes with fear. When Michael died, everything was out of her hands. She spent the rest of her life making sure that never happens again. At what cost? Clara asked quietly. My daughter needs me, Mr. Carrington. Not a foundation, not an experimental procedure. Her mother. Richard was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Take my car. Morris will drive. You to the hospital. But Mrs. Carrington, leave Bianca to me, he said firmly. Some things are more important than protocols and power struggles. Go to your daughter, Clara. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Thank you. Just be back by tomorrow evening, he added with a small smile. I have a feeling things are about to change around here. One way or another. Sydney Children's Hospital was a world away from the Carrington mansion, bright colours replacing muted elegance, cheerful murals instead of priceless art, the organised chaos of healing rather than the sterile perfection of wealth. Clara found it strangely comforting as she made her way to Sophie's room. The familiar antiseptic smell and squeaking linoleum, a reminder of what truly mattered. Sophie was sitting up in bed, her dark curls, so like Clara's own, tied back in a messy ponytail. She was pale but alert, flipping through a picture book with the careful concentration of a child who had spent too much time in hospital beds. When she looked up and saw Clara, her entire face transformed. "Mummy!" she cried, dropping the book and holding out thin arms. Clara crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering her daughter close, breathing in the scent of hospital shampoo and the indefinable essence that was purely Sophie. "Hello, my love. I've missed you so much." "You're early," Sophie exclaimed, pulling back to study her mother's face. "It's not Sunday yet. Did you escape from the Dragon Lady's castle?" Clara laughed despite herself. Mrs. Patterson had clearly been embellishing her explanations of Clara's new job. "Not exactly. Mr. Carrington gave me permission to visit because you weren't feeling well." Sophie made a face. "It's just a stupid fever. Dr. Hayes says it's normal." "Even normal fevers deserve mummy visits," Clara replied, smoothing back Sophie's hair. She settled onto the edge of the bed. "Show me what you've been working on. Mrs. Patterson said there's a fairy castle." Tyroing. For the next hour, Clara immersed herself completely in Sophie's world, examining drawings, listening to stories about hospital adventures, and helping with a jigsaw puzzle featuring Australian wildlife. It was as if the Carrington household existed in another dimension, one that couldn't touch this bubble of mother-daughter connection. The spell was broken when a nurse appeared with Sophie's medication and a visitor clipboard. "Clara, you have someone asking to see you at the front desk. They said it's important, something about the Prescott Foundation." Clara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Had Bianca followed her here? Was this the final confrontation? "I'll be right back, Soph," she promised, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Finish your kangaroo section while I'm gone." The hospital corridors seemed longer than usual as Clara made her way to the reception area, mentally preparing herself for whatever reckoning awaited. But it wasn't Bianca who stood by the front desk. It was Dr. Elizabeth Chen. The surgeon was dressed casually in jeans and a blazer rather than hospital scrubs, her sleek black hair pulled back in a professional ponytail. She extended her hand as Clara approached. "Ms. Dawson, I'm Dr. Chen. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit." Clara shook her hand automatically, confusion evident on her face. "How did you know I was here?" "Richard Carrington called me," Dr. Chen explained. "He thought it might be helpful if we discussed Sophie's case directly, without intermediaries." Her expression revealed nothing about what she might know regarding the earlier confrontation. "I see," Clara replied cautiously. "And did Mrs. Carrington approve this meeting?" Something like amusement flickered in Dr. Chen's eyes. "Bianca and I have worked together for years, Miss Dawson. I respect her immensely, but I make my own medical decisions." She gestured toward the hospital cafe. "Could I buy you a coffee? I've reviewed Sophie's file in detail and I'd like to discuss some options with you." The cafe was relatively quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Clara sat across from Dr. Chen, hands wrapped around a much-needed cappuccino, trying to gauge the woman's intentions. I understand there's been some confusion regarding Sophie's eligibility for our new valve procedure, Dr. Chen began, her tone professional, but not unkind. Let me be clear. Sophie is an excellent candidate on medical grounds alone. Her age, the specific nature of her VSD, and her overall health despite the condition make her ideal for this approach. Then why hasn't it been offered before now? Clara asked. 2 reasons, Dr. Chen replied frankly. First, the procedure only received preliminary approval 3 months ago. Second, it's expensive, about $300,000 all told, and not covered by standard insurance. She leaned forward slightly. The Prescott Foundation funds 10 procedures annually for families who couldn't otherwise afford it. Clara absorbed this information carefully. And Sophie is being considered for one of those spots? She's on the short list, Dr. Chen confirmed. The final decision will be made by the Foundation Board next week. And Mrs. Carrington chairs that board, Clara concluded. Dr. Chen studied her with shrewd eyes. Yes, though she recuses herself from voting on individual cases to avoid conflicts of interest. She took a sip of her own coffee. May I speak candidly, Ms. Dawson? Please. I've known Bianca for nearly a decade. She can be difficult, controlling, even cold at times, but she's also the reason this program exists at all. After Michael died, she channeled her grief into ensuring other children wouldn't share his fate. Dr. Chen set down her cup. Whatever personal dynamics exist between you, don't let them interfere with what might be Sophie's best chance. Clara felt torn between maternal protectiveness and practical reality. I was given the name of another cardiologist, Dr. Sharma, for a second opinion. Rohan? Dr. Chen looked genuinely surprised. He's excellent. One of my colleagues, actually. We've co-authored several papers. She smiled slightly. Caroline's art therapy program partner, I assume. Bianca and Caroline have very different approaches to the Foundation's work. The revelation that the 2 doctors knew each other, perhaps even respected each other, complicated Clara's understanding of the situation. This wasn't the clear-cut conflict Caroline had implied. Would you mind if I examined Sophie while I'm here? Dr. Chen asked. Purely informational, no commitments. It would give me a better sense of her current status. Clara hesitated, then nodded. I'd like to be present. Of course. Sophie was initially shy with Dr. Chen, but the surgeon's gentle manner soon won her over. Clara watched as Dr. Chen conducted a thorough examination, explaining each step in terms Sophie could understand, even making her laugh with a stethoscope game that disguised a careful listening of her heart sounds. You've been very brave, Sophie, Dr. Chen said when she'd finished. I bet you're the bravest 8-year-old in all of Sydney. The bravest in all of Australia, Sophie corrected with unexpected confidence, making both women smile. I stand corrected, Dr. Chen agreed. She turned to Clara. Could we step outside for a moment? In the hallway, Dr. Chen's expression became more serious. Sophie's current treatment plan is adequate for now, but the structural issues will become more problematic as she grows. The new procedure could eliminate the need for multiple surgeries throughout her childhood. And the risks? Clara asked. Lower than traditional approaches. Recovery time is shorter, and success rates in our trials have been over 90%. Dr. Chen handed Clara a business card. Think about it. Call me directly if you have questions. Medical questions, not Foundation politics. After Dr. Chen left, Clara returned to Sophie's room, her mind swirling with new information. The simple narrative of Bianca as villain and the Foundation as a power play had been complicated by Dr. Chen's visit. Perhaps the situation wasn't as black and white as it had first appeared. Was that lady a new doctor? Sophie asked as Clara helped her with the puzzle again. Yes, sweetheart. Dr. Chen is a heart specialist who might be able to help you. Sophie considered this thoughtfully. Is she from the Dragon Lady's castle too? Clara laughed softly. Not exactly, but she works with Mrs. Carrington sometimes. Is Mrs. Carrington really a dragon? Sophie asked, fitting a koala piece into place with careful precision. Clara paused, considering her answer. No, not a dragon. Just someone who's had a difficult time and doesn't always know how to show her feelings. Like Matilda at school. Sophie nodded sagely. She pulls my hair, but Miss Jenkins says it's because she's sad about her parents fighting. Out of the mouths of babes. Clara marveled at her daughter's simple wisdom. Something like that, yes. They spent the remainder of the afternoon together, Clara reading aloud from Sophie's favorite books and helping her create a new drawing, this one featuring a woman with dark hair standing beside a little girl, both holding what appeared to be stethoscopes. "It's you and me when I'm better," Sophie explained. "We'll be doctors together and fix everyone's hearts." Clara's own heart squeezed painfully in her chest. "That's a wonderful plan, Soph." As evening approached, Clara faced the difficult moment of departure. Sophie's fever had subsided, and the doctors were satisfied with her condition, but leaving her daughter never got easier. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Sophie asked, her small fingers clutching Clara's. "I'll try, my love. If not tomorrow, then very soon." Clara kissed her forehead. "Be good for the nurses, and keep working on our special drawing." In the corridor outside, Clara leaned against the wall, gathering her composure before heading back to the Carrington mansion and whatever consequences awaited. Her phone buzzed with a text, not from Mrs. Patterson or Richard as she expected, but from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Rose Bay Wharf at 8 p.m. Bianca Clara stared at the message, uncertainty washing over her. The direct communication was unexpected, as was the request for a meeting away from the house. After a moment's hesitation, she replied with a simple, "I'll be there." The evening air was cool as Clara arrived at Rose Bay Wharf. The harbour stretched before her, Sydney's lights twinkling across the water. The Opera House and Harbour Bridge illuminated against the night sky. It was a postcard-perfect view that tourists travelled across the world to see, but Clara barely noticed it as she scanned the area for Bianca. She found her employer standing at the end of the wharf, gazing out at the water. Bianca had exchanged her usual perfect attire for jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, a transformation so unexpected that Clara almost didn't recognize her. "Mrs. Carrington," she called softly. Bianca turned, and in the gentle glow of the wharf lights, Clara saw something she'd never witnessed before. Vulnerability etched across the woman's features. "Thank you for coming," Bianca said quietly. "And here, away from the house, I think you can call me Bianca." The first step toward something new had been taken. Clara just wasn't sure yet where this path would lead. The lights of the city shimmered on the dark water as Clara joined Bianca at the edge of the wharf. For several moments neither woman spoke, the gentle lapping of waves against the pilings providing a rhythmic backdrop to the unspoken tension between them. "How is Sophie?" Bianca finally asked, her gaze still fixed on the harbour. "Better. Her fever's down and she was drawing when I left." Clara studied Bianca's profile, searching for clues to this unexpected summoning. "Dr. Chen came to see her today." Bianca nodded. "I know. Richard told me. Did you send her?" "No." Bianca turned to face Clara, the harbour breeze lifting strands of her blonde hair. "Elizabeth makes her own decisions. Always has." She gestured to a nearby bench. "Shall we sit?" The wooden bench was weathered from years of salt air and sunshine. Clara noticed how Bianca seemed unconcerned about sitting on the public seating in her designer clothes, another departure from her usual fastidious behavior. "I owe you an explanation," Bianca began, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "and perhaps an apology." Clara remained silent, waiting. "When your application came across my desk, I recognized Sophie's name immediately. Her case had been flagged by our Foundation's medical team as a potential candidate for the new procedure." Bianca's hands twisted slightly in her lap, a nervous gesture Clara had never seen before. "I could have recused myself from the hiring decision, but I didn't." "Why?" Clara asked. The question simple but weighted. Bianca took a deep breath. "Because I needed to know what kind of mother you were." The admission hung in the air between them. Clara felt a surge of indignation. "You were testing me." "In a sense, yes." Bianca's eyes met Clara's directly. "The Foundation receives hundreds of applications for every procedure we fund. Medical criteria narrow the field, but ultimately we have to make impossible choices. Who receives a chance at a normal life and who doesn't? And you decided my parenting style should be a factor?" Clara couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Not exactly." Bianca looked away toward the distant outline of the harbour bridge. "When Michael was sick, our house was chaos. Our mother fell apart. Medication, alcohol, inability to function. Our father buried himself in work. I was 15, trying to hold everything together, to be perfect in a situation that was anything but." The personal revelation was unexpected, and Clara felt her anger softening despite herself. The day Michael died, Bianca continued, her voice now barely above a whisper, I'd gone to check on him after school. He was supposed to be resting, but he'd gotten up to reach a book on his shelf. I found him collapsed on the floor, her hands clenched tightly. I did CPR for 18 minutes before the ambulance arrived. 18 minutes of begging my brother not to leave me. Clara's heart constricted. Bianca, I'm so sorry. The foundation isn't just about funding medical procedures, Bianca said, visibly composing herself. It's about supporting children through their recovery. And recovery requires stability, resilience, things Michael never had because our family was too broken to provide. Them, she turned back to Clara. When I saw Sophie's case and then your application, I needed to know, are you strong enough to carry her through this? Because the procedure is just the beginning. The pieces were finally falling into place. Bianca's impossible standards, the constant testing, the underlying purpose that Caroline and Richard had hinted at, but never fully explained. So the job? So was what? An extended interview for Sophie's place in the program, Clara asked. Initially, perhaps, Bianca admitted. But it became something more. Your resilience, your quiet dignity, even when I was at my worst. It was everything our household lacked when Michael was ill. A hint of respect colored her voice. I've never had a housekeeper stand up to me the way you did today. Clara wasn't sure whether to feel manipulated or understood. You threatened my job, my ability to care for my daughter. A test. I regretted the moment the words left my mouth, Bianca said, surprising Clara with her candor. Richard made that abundantly clear when he confronted me afterward. The mention of Richard brought another dimension to the conversation. Your husband seems to have a different approach to, well, everything, Clara observed carefully. A small, genuine smile touched Bianca's lips for the first time. Richard sees the best in people. It's his gift and his burden, especially when it comes to me. She glanced down at her wedding ring. He married the broken girl who couldn't save her brother, not the perfect society wife I pretend to be. Sometimes I think he's the only person who sees through all of it. Until now, Clara said quietly. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Something had shifted between them, not friendship exactly, but a recognition of shared vulnerability. Sophie will receive the procedure, Bianca stated definitively. The board votes next week, but I've already spoken with the key members. Her medical need is clear, and Dr. Chen's assessment today only confirmed it. Relief washed through Clara, but she tamped it down, needing absolute clarity. Regardless of whether I continue working for you? Yes. Bianca stood, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. That's what I needed you to know. Your job and Sophie's care are separate issues. Whatever you decide about your employment, the foundation's commitment stands. Clara remained seated, processing the magnitude of what she was being offered, a chance for Sophie to have a normal life, free from the specter of multiple surgeries and constant medical intervention. Why tell me this here? She asked, gesturing to the wharf. Why not at the house? Bianca gazed out at the harbor, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. Michael and I used to come here with our grandfather. Before he got sick, it was the last place I remember being truly happy as a family. She turned back to Clara. Some conversations need neutral ground. Clara stood to join her at the railing, the two women side by side, looking out at the same view with very different perspectives. I don't know if I can continue working for you, Clara admitted. Not after everything that's happened. I understand. Bianca's voice was steady, but I hope you'll consider it. Not for me, but for the household. Morris, Maggie, they've noticed the difference these past 2 weeks. So has Richard. She hesitated before adding, I've noticed it too. The admission clearly cost her something in pride. Clara recognized the effort it took for someone like Bianca to acknowledge impact beyond her control. I need time to think, she said finally, and to discuss options with Sophie's doctors. Of course, Bianca nodded. Take tomorrow, Sunday, as planned. We can talk again on Monday. She straightened, some of her usual composure returning. Morris is waiting with the car to take you back to your daughter. Stay with her tonight if you wish. The gesture of understanding, so at odds with the rigid employer Clara had first encountered, was the final surprise of an evening full of revelations. Thank you, Clara said simply. As they walked back along the wharf toward the waiting car, Bianca added one final thought. Whatever you decide, Clara, know that you've already done what I couldn't. You've put your daughter first, always. That's worth more than any foundation grant or medical procedure. In that moment, beneath the Sydney stars, Clara glimpsed the person behind the perfect facade, a woman still carrying the weight of a childhood tragedy, still trying to save the brother she couldn't save, still searching for redemption in the lives of children she would never know. And for the first time since entering the Carrington household, Clara wondered if perhaps they had more in common than she'd ever imagined. Sunday morning found Clara beside Sophie's hospital bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest as she slept. The night nurse had reported no further fevers, and in the soft morning light, Sophie's color looked better than it had in weeks. Clara's phone buzzed softly with an incoming text. She expected Mrs. Patterson checking in, but instead saw Richard Carrington's name on the screen. Hope Sophie is feeling better. Caroline insists on making Sunday brunch if you'd like to join us. No pressure, no expectations. The casual invitation was yet another surprise in a weekend full of them. Clara typed a polite decline, then paused before sending it. After her conversation with Bianca last night, she found herself re-evaluating everything she thought she knew about the Carrington household. Before she could decide, Sophie stirred and opened her eyes. "Morning, Mummy," she mumbled, reaching for Clara's hand. "You stayed." Clara squeezed her daughter's fingers gently. "All night, love. How are you feeling?" "Hungry," Sophie declared with conviction. "Can we have pancakes?" Clara laughed, relief washing through her at this most normal of requests. "I'll check with the nurse, but I think that can be arranged." As Sophie became fully awake, her energy returned with remarkable speed. By mid-morning, she was sitting up in bed, working on a new drawing and chattering about the other children in the pediatric ward. Clara marveled at her resilience, a quality Bianca had recognized and valued, perhaps because she'd needed it so desperately in her own childhood. "Mummy, when will I get to see your work?" Sophie asked suddenly. "The big house with the swimming pool?" Clara blinked in surprise. "How did you know about the swimming pool?" Sophie gave her a look of exaggerated patience. "Mrs. Patterson showed me pictures on her phone. She said it's one of the fanciest houses in Sydney and that your boss lady is very important." "Mrs. Patterson has been doing her research, I see." Clara smiled, smoothing Sophie's curls. "Would you like to see it someday?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Can I swim in the pool? Mrs. Patterson said it has a view of the opera house." The innocent question crystallized something in Clara's mind. "Maybe. Let me talk to Mr. and Mrs. Carrington first." She pulled out her phone and responded to Richard's text. "Sophie is much better today, thank you. We'd love to join you for brunch, but I'm hesitant to leave the hospital." Richard's reply came almost immediately. "Understand completely. Alternative proposal. We bring brunch to you. Caroline makes excellent scones and has been looking for an excuse to visit the hospital for her art program anyway." Clara stared at the message, touched by the unexpected offer. After a moment's consideration, she typed, "That would be lovely if it's not too much trouble. Sophie would be thrilled." When Richard, Caroline, and to Clara's surprise, Maggie arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, they came bearing not just brunch, but an assortment of gifts that transformed Sophie's sterile room into something festive. Caroline had brought art supplies from her gallery's children's program. Maggie had prepared Sophie's requested pancakes, kept warm in specialized containers, and Richard carried a plush koala almost as big as Sophie herself. "We thought you might like a little company," Richard explained as Clara greeted them at the door, clearly overwhelmed by the gesture. Sophie, initially shy with the strangers, blossomed under Caroline's enthusiastic attention. Within minutes they were engaged in an impromptu art lesson, Caroline showing Sophie techniques for blending colors that had the little girl giggling with delight. "She's wonderful with children," Clara observed to Richard as they stood slightly apart watching the scene. "Caroline wanted a houseful of her own," Richard replied quietly. "It wasn't in the cards, medically speaking. She channels that energy into her art programs instead." Clara hadn't known this about Caroline, and the information added another layer to her understanding of the complex family dynamics at play. "Thank you for arranging this. It means more than you know." Richard nodded, his expression thoughtful as he watched Sophie. "Bianca told me about your conversation last night." "All of it?" Clara asked cautiously. "Enough." He met her gaze directly. "She's trying, Clara. In her own way." "I know." Clara looked over at Maggie, who was arranging brunch on the hospital's small table with the same care she would use in the Carrington dining room. I'm just not sure I can go back to being just the housekeeper after everything that's happened. Who said anything? About just the housekeeper? Richard asked with a slight smile. Positions evolve, relationships change. Before Clara could respond, Sophie called out excitedly, "Mummy, come see what Caroline taught me. I can make clouds that look real." The brunch unfolded with surprising ease, as if they were friends gathering rather than employer and employee navigating an unprecedented situation. Sophie charmed everyone, especially Maggie, who promised to teach her how to make proper Australian lamingtons once she was well enough to visit the house. "She has your spirit," Caroline remarked to Clara as they watched Sophie showing Richard her hospital room view. "Strong but gentle. It's a rare combination." "Thank you," Clara replied, touched by the observation. "She's had to be strong. Stronger than any child should need to be." Caroline nodded thoughtfully. "Bianca was like that once, after Michael died." She glanced at Clara. "Did she tell you about him?" "Yes, last night." "That's significant." Caroline looked genuinely surprised. "Bianca doesn't discuss Michael with anyone, not even Richard, really." Clara wasn't sure how to respond to this revelation. "She seems to have devoted her life to the foundation because of him." "It's been her way of coping," Caroline agreed. "Control what you can, fund what you can't, never show weakness." She sighed softly. "I've always thought she needed to find a healthier outlet for her grief, but who am I to judge? We all have our methods of survival." As the visit wound down, Sophie's energy began to flag, her eyelids drooping despite her protests that she wasn't tired. Clara tucked her in for a nap. The koala nestled beside her. "Thank you all for coming," she said, as she walked the Carringtons and Maggie to the door. "It meant the world to her, and to me." "We're the ones who should be thanking you," Richard replied, "for letting us into your world even after everything." As they prepared to leave, Caroline pulled Clara aside. "Have you thought more about Dr. Sharma's consultation? Even with the foundation procedure approved, a second opinion is always valuable." Clara nodded. "I'll call him tomorrow. Dr. Chen actually spoke highly of him." "Did she?" Caroline looked pleasantly surprised. "Well, that's something, I suppose. Progress on all fronts." After they left, Clara sat beside the sleeping Sophie, reflecting on the unexpected turn her life had taken in just 2 weeks. From desperate job seeker to the center of a family drama, she still didn't fully understand, caught between professional boundaries and personal connections that seemed to shift by the hour. Yet as she watched her daughter sleep peacefully, one thing became crystal clear. Whatever her decision about the Carrington household, whatever complications lay ahead with the foundation and Sophie's procedure, she was no longer facing these challenges alone. Later that afternoon, as Sophie continued to nap, Clara stepped into the hallway to make a call she'd been contemplating since the wharf conversation. "Bianca, it's Clara. I think we should talk about Monday and about the future." The next morning, Clara arrived at the Carrington mansion with a sense of purpose that had been absent when she'd first walked through those imposing gates. Sophie remained at the hospital for observation, but with promising signs and talk of discharge within days, particularly with the foundation procedure now on the horizon. Bianca was waiting in the kitchen, dressed more casually than usual in tailored trousers and a silk blouse, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The formal distance of employer and employee seemed to have evaporated overnight, replaced by a cautious but genuine attempt at connection. "Clara," she greeted with a small nod. "Thank you for coming. Coffee? Please." As Bianca prepared 2 cups with surprising domestic competence, Clara noticed subtle changes in the kitchen, her favorite mug placed prominently. On the counter, the schedule board updated with more reasonable time allocations for daily tasks. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Bianca said as she handed Clara her coffee. "About your role here, and what it might look like going forward." "So have I," Clara replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I can't return to the way things were." "I don't expect you to." Bianca took a seat across from Clara at the kitchen island, another departure from previous protocols. "Richard and I discussed it at length yesterday. We'd like to offer you a different position." Clara raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. "The foundation needs a family liaison, someone who can work directly with the children and parents in our programs, providing support beyond the medical aspects." Bianca's eyes met Clara's directly. "Someone who understands both sides of the equation, the families and the administrative complexities." "You want me to work for the foundation?" Clara asked, surprised by the direction of the conversation. Part-time initially while Sophie recovers from her procedure. The role would include flexible hours, comprehensive benefits, and significantly better compensation than your current position. Bianca took a careful sip of her coffee. "We'd find a replacement for your household duties, of course." Clara considered the offer thoughtfully. "And if I decline?" "Then we part ways professionally, with excellent references and the Foundation's continued support for Sophie's procedure and aftercare." Bianca's tone was matter-of-fact, without the manipulation or threat that might have colored such a conversation just days ago. "This isn't a condition, Clara. It's an opportunity, if you want it." The sincerity in Bianca's voice was unmistakable. Clara thought of Sophie's drawing of them both with stethoscopes helping other children. Perhaps this was a path toward making that childish dream a different kind of reality. "I'd need details." "Job. Description, expectations, boundaries." "Of course." Bianca nodded, reaching for a folder she'd placed on the counter. "It's all here. Take time to review it, discuss it with Sophie's doctors. There's no rush to decide." As Clara accepted the folder, their fingers brushed briefly. A simple human contact that would have been unthinkable 2 weeks ago. "Whatever you choose," Bianca added quietly, "I want you to know that meeting you and Sophie, it's changed things for me, for this household." The admission hung in the air between them, not quite an apology, not quite a thank you, but something equally valuable, an acknowledgement of impact. "We've changed too," Clara replied simply. Outside, Sydney Harbour glittered in the morning sun, bridges connecting separate shores, waters flowing. Beneath them all, some divisions could never be erased, employer and employee, privilege and necessity, grief and hope. But perhaps, Clara thought as she opened the folder, they could build their own kind of bridge across those dividing waters. 6 months passed like the changing seasons, subtle at first, then suddenly transforming everything. Sydney's summer heat gave way to the gentler warmth of autumn, then the mild chill of winter, before spring returned with its promise of renewal. The Carrington mansion remained as imposing as ever from the outside, its white walls gleaming in the morning sunlight, its gardens meticulously maintained by Morris and his team. But inside, changes had rippled through its perfect rooms, like stones cast into still water. Clara stood on the terrace, watching. Sophie splash in the infinity pool with Richard, their laughter carrying across the water. At 9 years old, Sophie showed little evidence of the fragile child she'd been just months before. The Foundation's valve procedure had been a complete success, her recovery swift and uncomplicated. Now she swam with the energy of any healthy child, her dark curls slick against her head as she tried to evade Richard's playful splashing. "She's getting faster," Bianca observed, joining Clara at the railing. "Richard can barely keep up." Clara smiled, noting how Bianca had exchanged her formal attire for white linen pants and a casual blouse. "Weekend attire," she called it. Another small but significant adaptation. "The physiotherapist says her stamina is above average now. You'd never know she spent half her life in hospital beds." Bianca handed Clara a glass of iced tea. The Foundation board was impressed with her progress report. "Dr. Chen is using Sophie's case as a model for the expanded program." "I saw the proposal," Clara nodded. 10 more procedures this year, 15 next year. It's remarkable progress. Their professional relationship had evolved into something neither woman could have predicted. Clara had accepted the position as family liaison for the Prescott Foundation, working 3 days a week while Sophie attended the private school that Bianca had quietly arranged a scholarship for. The remaining days, Clara consulted from home, coordinating with families preparing for similar procedures, offering the support and guidance she wished she'd had during Sophie's medical journey. The Carrington household had adapted around these changes. A new housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, an experienced woman in her 50s with an unflappable demeanor, had taken over Clara's former duties. But on weekends, by unspoken agreement, Clara and Sophie often found themselves at the mansion, the lines between professional and personal relationships blurring into something new and undefined. "The Gala Planning Committee meets tomorrow," Bianca said, turning business-ward as she often did when emotional undercurrents threatened to surface. "We're featuring 3 of our success stories, including Sophie, if you're comfortable with that." "She'd be thrilled," Clara replied. "She's already practicing her speech." Bianca's expression softened. "She has her mother's poise." The compliment delivered with simple sincerity, represented how far they'd come. The early tensions had gradually given way to mutual respect, then cautious friendship, and finally a partnership that leveraged both women's strengths, Bianca's organizational brilliance and connections, Clara's empathy and practical perspective. Caroline called this morning, Bianca continued, her voice carefully neutral. The hospital arts program is showing remarkable results. She's bringing some of the children's work to the gala. The relationship between the sisters-in-law remained complex, but had thawed considerably since the confrontation 6 months earlier. Caroline's art therapy program had received foundation funding, a concession from Bianca that acknowledged the holistic approach to healing that Clara had advocated for in her new role. Dr. Sharma mentioned that 2 of his patients have shown significant emotional improvement through the program, Clara noted, naming the cardiologist who now worked in tandem with Dr. Chen on many cases. He's become quite the advocate for integrative approaches. So I've heard, Bianca replied with the ghost of her old crispness, but there was no real bite to it anymore. Their conversation was interrupted by Sophie calling from the pool. "Mummy, Bianca, watch this!" She executed a perfect dive beneath the water, surfacing with a triumphant grin that made both women applaud automatically. "She's showing off for you," Clara said quietly. "She values your approval, you know." Bianca's composed expression faltered momentarily, revealing a flash of something vulnerable and genuine. "The feeling is mutual," she admitted. Inside the house, the phone rang and Maggie appeared at the terrace door. "Mrs. Carrington, it's Dr. Chen on the line. Something about the Matthews case." "Excuse me," Bianca said, straightening immediately. "I should take this." As she disappeared inside, Richard hauled himself out of the pool and approached Clara, toweling his hair dry. "She'll be on that call for at least an hour," he predicted with a knowing smile. "Elizabeth never makes short calls when it's about a patient." "I should check in with the Matthews family anyway," Clara replied. "They're still struggling with the pre-procedure protocols." Richard shook his head with gentle amazement. 6 months ago, you were polishing silver in our dining room. Now you're coordinating care plans with Australia's top cardiac surgeon. Clara watched Sophie continuing to swim, strong and confident in the water. "Life takes unexpected turns." "Indeed it does." Richard's expression grew more serious. "Clara, there's something Bianca and I have been discussing, a proposal of sorts." "Another job change?" Clara asked with a raised eyebrow. "Not exactly." He glanced toward the house, then back to Clara. "The East Wing guest suite, the one with the separate entrance and garden access. It's sitting empty most of the time." Clara waited, unsure where this was heading. "We'd like to offer it to you and Sophie. As a residence, not staff quarters." He hurried on before she could respond. "The commute from your apartment is becoming impractical with your foundation responsibilities. Sophie's school is just 10 minutes from here, and with her swimming therapy—" "Richard," Clara interrupted gently, "that's very generous, but I'm not sure it's appropriate. I work for the foundation now, but there are still boundaries." "Are there?" he challenged mildly. "Sophie spends more weekends here than at your apartment. You have dinner with us 3 nights a week. Bianca consults you on foundation matters at all hours." His expression was kind but direct. "The boundaries blurred long ago, Clara. We're just suggesting we acknowledge that reality." The offer was tempting in practical terms. Clara's rented apartment was small and far from both Sophie's school and the foundation offices. The East Wing suite would provide space, privacy, and convenience. Yet something held her back, a lingering sense that accepting might create complications none of them had anticipated. "I need to think about it," she said finally, "and discuss it with Sophie." Richard nodded, unsurprised. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He glanced toward the pool where Sophie was now floating peacefully on her back. "Though I suspect I know what her vote will be, later." That evening, after Sophie had been bundled into Richard's car for the drive back to their apartment, another routine that had developed naturally, Richard or Morris driving them home on Sunday evenings, Clara found herself alone with Bianca in the kitchen. The formal dining room had been abandoned for Sunday meals in favor of the more intimate kitchen island where they now sat, finishing the last of a bottle of Australian Shiraz. "Richard told me about your conversation," Bianca said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About the East Wing," Clara nodded. "It's a generous offer. But you have reservations." It wasn't a question. "Don't you?" Clara asked. 6 months ago you were testing how long I could withstand your impossible standards. Now you're suggesting we live under the same Harufu by choice. A small smile played at the corners of Bianca's mouth. Life takes unexpected turns. So Richard mentioned. Clara twirled her wine glass thoughtfully. I'm concerned about maintaining professional boundaries, about Sophie becoming too attached to all of this. She gestured vaguely at the luxury surrounding them. Too attached to us, you mean? Bianca said with characteristic directness. Clara didn't deny it. You and Richard have been incredibly generous. But what happens if the professional relationship changes? If the foundation decides my position is no longer necessary? Sophie would lose not just security, but connections she's come to value. Bianca was silent for a long moment, considering Clara's words. When she spoke, her voice carried a depth of emotion, rarely displayed. When Michael died, I built walls, perfect, impenetrable walls to keep everyone at a safe distance. The foundation became my purpose, but not my connection. She met Clara's gaze directly. It took me 20 years to understand what I was missing. Clara waited, sensing there was more. Sophie reminded me what it means to care about someone beyond what they can do or provide. Bianca set down her wine glass. And you showed me that strength doesn't have to mean isolation. The admission hung in the air between them, perhaps the most personal Bianca had ever been. What I'm trying to say, she continued with visible effort, is that the East Wing offer isn't about convenience or professional practicality. It's about family, the kind you choose, not just the kind you're born into. Clara felt her eyes sting unexpectedly. Bianca, you don't have to answer now, Bianca said quickly, retreating slightly from the emotional precipice. Think about it. Talk to Sophie. Later that night, in their small apartment, Clara sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, watching her daughter arrange her stuffed animals. The koala from Richard had pride of place beside her pillow. Sophie, she began carefully, what would you think about us moving into Mr. and Mrs. Carrington's house? Not my old room, but a special apartment inside their house, with our own entrance and garden. Sophie's eyes widened. We'd live with Bianca and Richard all the time, and swim in the pool whenever we want? It's not quite that simple, Clara cautioned. We'd have our own space, and I'd still be working for the foundation. It would be different from our weekends there. Sophie considered this with surprising seriousness for a 9-year-old. Would we still be us, or would we be part of their family? The question cut to the heart of Clara's own concerns. We'll always be us, Soph. You and me, no matter where we live. But they feel like family too now, Sophie observed with childish simplicity. Different from Mrs. Patterson or the hospital people. Richard teaches me swimming and Bianca helps with my math homework, like a family does. Out of the mouths of babes, Clara thought, not for the first time. Yes, I suppose they do. Then we should live there, Sophie concluded with the straightforward logic of childhood, because families should stay together. As Clara turned out the light and kissed her daughter goodnight, she wondered at the wisdom hidden in Sophie's simple statement. Perhaps the boundaries she was trying to maintain were less about professional propriety and more about her own fear of allowing herself and Sophie to fully embrace the unexpected family they had found. The autumn day dawned clear and bright, Sydney Harbour glittering beneath, a cloudless sky. Clara stood in the East Wing garden, watching the morning light transform the rose bushes into flaming torches of pink and red. 6 weeks had passed since their move to the Carrington estate, and still there were moments when the beauty of their new home caught her by surprise. The transition had been smoother than she'd anticipated. The East Wing suite offered privacy when needed, and connection when desired. A perfect balance that respected everyone's boundaries, while acknowledging the deeper bonds that had formed. Sophie had blossomed even further in the new arrangement. Her bedroom overlooked the garden and harbour beyond. Her school was a short drive away, and she had the stability of routine coupled with the luxury of space. She spent afternoons in the pool under Richard's watchful eye, evenings helping Maggie bake in the kitchen, and weekends exploring Sydney with both Clara and, increasingly often, Bianca. The foundation work continued to evolve, with Clara now leading a team of 3 liaisons who supported families through the expanded valve procedure program. Dr. Chen and Dr. Sharma had developed a collaborative approach that combined medical excellence with emotional support, creating a model that other hospitals were beginning to notice and emulate. Morning ritual, Richard's voice interrupted her reverie. He stood at the garden gate, 2 coffee cups in hand. Clara smiled, accepting the offered cup, just appreciating the view. Sometimes I still can't believe we live here. Having second thoughts? He asked, joining her in. Contemplation of the harbour. The opposite, she admitted. It feels right in a way I didn't expect. Richard nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. Over the months, he had become a steady presence in both Clara and Sophie's lives, not replacing the father Sophie had never known, but offering a different kind of male guidance that was thoughtful, kind, and consistent. "Bianca's in rare form this morning," he remarked with affectionate amusement. "The foundation gala is tonight, and she's redirected the flower arrangements 3 times already. The perfectionist returns," Clara chuckled. "I should go help before Mrs. Winters quits in protest. Actually, I came to tell you that you have a visitor. Caroline's here with the art display for the gala. She's asking for your input." Clara followed Richard through the garden and into the main house where controlled chaos reigned. The annual Prescott Foundation Gala was the highlight of Sydney's philanthropic calendar, and this year it would be held at the Carrington estate rather than a hotel ballroom. Bianca's decision influenced by Clara's suggestion that donors needed to feel a personal connection to the foundation's work. Caroline stood in the formal living room, directing the placement of framed artwork created by children in the hospital program. Her gallery team moved efficiently around her, transforming the space into an elegant exhibition. "Clara!" she exclaimed, breaking away to embrace her. "Perfect timing. I need your eyes on the sequence. We're telling a visual story of the healing journey, and I want to make sure the emotional arc works." Clara had grown fond of Caroline's artistic passion and straightforward manner. The two women had developed a friendship independent of the Carrington household, occasionally meeting for lunch or gallery visits when Clara's schedule allowed. "It looks beautiful already," Clara observed, walking along the displays. "Sophie will be thrilled to see her sunset. Painting included." "It's one of our centerpieces," Caroline confirmed. "The progression from her pre-procedure work to the pieces she created during recovery is exactly what we want donors to see. The transformation their support makes possible." They were discussing the lighting requirements when Bianca entered, clipboard in hand and phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, Dr. Chen. The presentation. Slides are finalized. We've allocated 7 minutes for the medical overview, followed by the family testimonials." She noticed Clara and Caroline nodding acknowledgement while continuing her conversation. Clara watched her with a mixture of admiration and affection. Bianca remained driven and demanding, but the brittle edges had softened, her perfectionism now channeled more productively. Her communication more direct and less cutting. The changes were subtle but significant, like the difference between ice and crystal, both clear and sharp, but one capable of warming without losing its essential nature. "I need to check on Sophie," Clara said to Caroline. "She's been practicing her speech all morning." She found her daughter in the kitchen with Maggie, perched on a stool and enjoying freshly baked scones while reciting her presentation for the evening's gala. "And now I can swim and run, and play netball at school," Sophie was saying, her voice clear and confident. "All because of the special heart valve that Dr. Chen and her team gave me." "Perfect delivery," Clara praised, dropping a kiss on Sophie's curls. "You'll have everyone in tears, in a good way." "Bianca says I should speak from the heart," Sophie replied seriously. "Which is funny because it's actually about my heart." Maggie chuckled, sliding another scone onto Sophie's plate. "You'll be the star of the show, Miss Sophie. Just remember to speak slowly like we practiced." The day passed in a flurry of preparations. By late afternoon, the mansion had been transformed. The formal areas gleamed with subtle, elegant gallery lighting highlighted the children's artwork, and the terrace had been set for a seated dinner for 80 of Sydney's most influential philanthropists. Clara helped Sophie dress in a new blue dress they'd chosen together, arranging her dark curls with a matching ribbon. "Nervous?" she asked as Sophie fidgeted with the small note cards containing her speech. "A little," Sophie admitted. "But Bianca says being nervous means you care about doing well." "She's right," Clara replied, struck again by how naturally Bianca's wisdom had become part of Sophie's worldview. "And you're going to be wonderful." A soft knock at the door heralded Bianca's arrival. She entered Sophie's bedroom with uncharacteristic hesitation, as if still conscious of respecting their private space. Within the larger household, "May I come in? I brought something for Sophie." She carried a small velvet box, which she handed to the little girl with formal grace. "For tonight's special occasion." Sophie opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny heart. "It's beautiful," she gasped, holding it up to the light. "It was Michael's gift to me on my 10th birthday," Bianca explained, her voice steady but gentle. "I thought it should belong to another brave heart now." The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on Clara. Bianca had never spoken of Michael to Sophie directly, though the girl knew the Foundation's history in general terms. "Who's Michael?" Sophie asked innocently. Bianca glanced at Clara, who nodded encouragement. "He was my brother," Bianca explained, sitting beside Sophie on the bed. "He had a special heart too, but a long time ago doctors didn't have the same treatments they have now." Sophie absorbed this information with characteristic thoughtfulness. "So he's why you help kids like me?" "Yes," Bianca confirmed, "and the bracelet is a reminder that brave hearts connect us, even when we can't see how." Sophie slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, then did something that once would have been unthinkable. She wrapped her arms around Bianca in a spontaneous hug. "Thank you. I'll take super good care of it." For a moment, Bianca seemed frozen in surprise, but then her arms came around Sophie, returning the embrace with careful tenderness. Over the child's head, her eyes met Clara's, a world of unspoken emotion passing between them. The gala itself exceeded all expectations. Under the stars and strings of elegant lights, Sydney's elite gathered to support the Foundation's work, moved by the children's artwork, the medical presentations, and most of all, by Sophie's simple, heartfelt speech about her journey from illness to health. "And now I have 2 homes," she concluded, veering slightly from her prepared remarks as she looked out at the assembled guests. "One is the apartment where I grew up with my mum, and one is here where we learned that family isn't just who you're born to, but who helps your heart heal." Clara, standing at the back of the audience, felt tears prick her eyes at the unscripted wisdom. Beside her, Richard squeezed her hand gently in silent understanding. As applause filled the terrace, Bianca rose from her seat at the head table to embrace Sophie before guiding her back to where Clara waited. The 3 of them stood together for a moment, connected by something deeper than circumstance or convenience or professional arrangement. "She was perfect," Bianca said, genuine pride warming her voice. "Absolutely perfect." Later, after the guests had departed and Sophie had been tucked into bed, still wearing her silver bracelet, Clara found herself once again on the terrace with Bianca. The night was clear, the harbour lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars. "The gala raised over 2 million, Bianca reported, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Enough to fund 20 procedures next year instead of 15. Sophie's speech was the turning point, Clara observed. "I saw at least 3 people writing checks during her conclusion. They stood in comfortable silence, so different from the tense, guarded interactions of their early days. Finally, Bianca spoke, her voice reflective. "When you first came here, I told you you'd regret ever stepping foot in this house." Clara smiled at the memory. "Your exact words, as I recall." "I was wrong," Bianca admitted. "Simply, for both of us." The acknowledgement required no response. They both knew the truth of it, how the impossible demands had given way to mutual respect, how the testing had evolved into trust, how the cold mansion had gradually warmed into something that, against all odds, felt like home. "What are you thinking?" Bianca asked, noting Clara's contemplative expression. Clara gestured toward the harbour, toward the city lights and the vast sky above. "That sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us exactly where we need to be." Bianca nodded, understanding perfectly, "even when we fight it every step of the way." "Especially then," Clara agreed. In the quiet of the evening, with Sophie sleeping peacefully nearby and the remnants of the successful gala surrounding them, Clara reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought them to this moment. From desperate job seeker to valued colleague, from suspicious employer to trusted friend, from isolated struggles to shared strength. The mansion, that had once seemed like a fortress of impossible perfection, had revealed itself to be something else entirely, not a prison of expectations, but a harbour of possibilities. And the woman who had been its cold guardian had proven to contain depths of understanding that only needed the right key to unlock. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Another day ending, another beginning just ahead. Clara thought of Sophie's bracelet, of Michael's memory finding new purpose, of broken hearts, both literal and figurative, finding ways to heal. "We should get some rest," Bianca said finally, straightening with some of her old crispness, though tempered now with warmth. Tomorrow's board meeting will require all our focus. Of course, Clara agreed, following her inside, though I'm sure it will be far less dramatic than a gala. With you advocating for the art therapy expansion? I wouldn't count on it, Bianca replied with the ghost of her old sharpness, but her eyes held a glimmer of humor. As they reached the point where their paths would diverge, Bianca to the main house, Clara to the east wing, they paused, the moment somehow significant despite its ordinariness. Good night, Clara, Bianca said softly, and thank you for everything. Good night, Bianca, Clara replied. See you in the morning. Simple words, ordinary courtesies, yet filled with the quiet strength of a bond that had been forged through conflict, tested by circumstance and ultimately transformed by the most powerful force of all, the courage to see beyond facades, to the hearts beneath. As Clara made her way to the east wing, to the home within a home that she shared with Sophie, she thought of her daughter's unplanned words at the gala. Family isn't just who you're born to, but who helps your heart heal. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Sometimes the greatest wisdom came from the simplest source, just as sometimes the coldest heart needed only the right kind of strength to remember how to warm.